Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the exam breakdown. Today is Monday, February the 3rd, 2025. Hope you're all doing well. My name is D. Kumar. It is a pleasure to be with you today for a little bit of time. Let's just say roughly your lunch. And during that time, the goal is to get you through enough content to help move you along so that you can study through this examination, get past, crush this thing, get your license, and then move on. Move on is what I want you to do. And I want you to be able to close deals. I want you to be able to help you in yours. I want you to become the greatness that you need to become in order to do this stuff. And I don't want this exam to get in your way. I have trained tens of thousands of people over the years, met lots of folks. It is an absolute pleasure. I love to teach. I love teaching these disciplines. I'm a real estate investor. I've been professionally investing since I was 18 years old. I love the idea that what I am doing could help somebody else move on, grow, become successful, have all of these things. Just to share, I had a little while ago, I was just kind of cleaning stuff out, and I found a thank you card. I taught this couple. They weren't married at the time. They were dating, and they happened to take my course. I was teaching live in a pretty big thing, and so it was in a sea of about 70 people, and I met them. They were very kind. She was very nice. And I get this card a couple of years later. So long story short, they end up getting married, right? They end up both getting their real estate license. He didn't practice as much, but she did. And she was able to close enough transactions to save a down payment, and they bought their first house, and then they had their first kid, and she just wanted to reach out a couple of years later just to thank me because she wasn't thinking about real estate as an opportunity. It just happened to be we were running a deal, and they were like, hey, she forced them, hey, take the class with me. I'm curious. But it sparked something in them. And what was really awesome is that she was able to reach back out. It makes me feel wonderful to know that those kinds of things happen. And sort of the power of just giving some time, showing people what's up, showing people that they can do something. And I know that a lot of folks might think, hey, what's the big deal? This is just a test and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's not. For so many people, it's really a meaningful event. It could be the event, the meaning behind it for you doing something on your own, or maybe you're doing something you just don't feel that it's right and you're moving forward. This is the thing that prompts the change. Lots of things are changing around us, and this is something that you can actually control. And so I am very excited to be able to spend some time with you to help you get through that. Okay, the exam breakdown on Mondays, we typically go over real estate content. On the exam breakdowns on Wednesdays, those are for my mortgage loan originators licensing folks. And there's a lot of cross-pollination, if you will, with the material. A lot of it's very similar. However, the mortgage folks do go much deeper dive into the legislation and everything else. So you can join them both. If you can't attend the live session, no big deal. We post these things afterwards. You can watch them to your heart's content or ad nauseum. And then the reality is, if you're live, you can join me. This is kind of cool. I appreciate you being here. If not, let's get you through it. Okay, so today's topic is going to be agency, and I'm going to be doing some Q&As. And again, over the years, I've been training for years. Over the years, I get these standard questions, and I've compiled a lexicon of questions, the classic ones that students ask, the ones that are the highest value when you're studying. My objective is to always eliminate the drag of studying, what you do not need to know versus what you do. I want to make sure that we focus on those only. So when you hear certain things, note that I'm really putting the attention into it, saying, well, I'm not too worried about this topic or that topic in relation to the examination. However, if you want to learn more about certain topics that I don't cover, mention it in the comments. And also, is there something that you want me to specifically go over? Do that as well. Some of these questions have come directly from students in the past. And what I'm doing in this series is going through them. We'll hit a couple of questions. I'll give you some notes, and then we'll go through some questions, and then we'll get out of here. Okay, if everything goes to plan, talking about maybe a half hour, maybe 30 minutes tops, maybe 40, and get you back from your lunch break. Maybe you're sneaking around behind your boss. Maybe you're thinking about quitting your job, finally moving on, doing the things that you want to do. And I say real estate is the perfect opportunity. It might not be brokerage forever. Maybe it's brokerage for now. And then eventually you get into becoming a professional investor, which is where I ended up. And I love the education and the technological sides of it. So you can pick and choose, right? But you have to start, and this is where you have to start. Let's do it. All right. today I want to go into some agency style questions. I'm just taking a peek over my shoulder. Just want to make sure everything is working for this stream. Looks like it is. There I am. All right, cool. All right, so if you have any questions, go ahead and ask, and we'll go from there. We are growing. This little live piece happens to be growing. We're seeing more and more student activity during the time that we're streaming, which is super exciting. And by the way, part 4 of our Mega Pack question series for 2025 is dropping today at 4 o'clock. So be sure to check it out. Part 4 is 76 through 100 killer questions. Man, just those 4 videos alone really is everything you need to pass. All right, let's do this. What is an agency relationship? Classic question. I'm going to read here a little bit. An agency relationship is a fiduciary relationship. The word fiduciary is what you need to understand. That's one of the operative phrases. Fiduciary basically means anything that I do or don't do as a real estate professional must directly go to impact on a positive level my client, the party that hires me. So a fiduciary, as a fiduciary, you might have a fiduciary relationship as an attorney. You might have a fiduciary relationship as a money manager for a client. So the fiduciary obligations exist all over, and brokerage is one of them where it does exist as well. Where an agent represents a client, remember the client is also the principal. They're going to call them that on the exam. By working in the client's always their best interest. Examples include a listing agent working for a seller, a buyer's agent working for a home buyer, or a leasing agent working for a tenant. And so we want to just make sure we understand what this is. Now, there is an initialism, sort of an acronym of what makes up a fiduciary obligation. And you want to remember the following. It's cold AC. There's another one that's old car. My opinion here is pick your poison. They basically boil out to the same things: care, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, and confidentiality. You just want to know these items, and you'll see them pop up on examinations. They're very popular. So cold AC or old car, and that's what an agency relationship is. The next question was, how are agency relationships established? And this is a critical one to understand. Agency relationships are established through a written agreement, oral agreement, where allowed, or implied actions that demonstrate mutual consent. So we can create agency, and you want to know that the ideal way to create an agency relationship is expressed through a written agreement, right? Through a written agreement. That's the most important one. Oral agreements typically for open listings are fine. For exclusive listings, you cannot have an exclusive that's oral. You need to have it in writing in order for it to be enforceable. And the implied actions of agents. On exams, you see implied action questions. Implied action questions. I'm going to write on exam. And sort of what that means is, so an implied action on an exam would be a question where the agent is going through a bunch of duties that they were sort of mentioned that they would do for a customer. A seller, they're showing the unit, they're getting offers, they present an offer to the seller accepts an offer, they don't have anything in formal agreement. Is there an implied contract of agency? And the answer is yes. So on the exam, they will absolutely love to do these implied agency style questions. So look out for them. They're definitely on there. Okay. Another question was, what are the most common types of listing contracts? And kind of what I'm doing here is I'm just flipping to the answers. I apologize. But I'm just kind of giving you the breakdown of what these are. All right. So the listing agreements, without doubt, are going to be on your test. And these 4 listing agreements are absolutely on this exam. So you need to know them inside and out, and some of the differences, the distinctions between. Primarily, you need to know the difference between the exclusive right to sell and the exclusive agency listing agreement. The exclusive right to sell, The agent has exclusive right to market the property and earns a commission. Now, this is the operative phrase here, regardless of who finds the buyer. And I'm going to add to this, including the seller. Including the seller. That is the critical piece. So an exclusive right to sell listing agreement means it includes even if the seller were to find their own buyer during this process. It's like, okay, I'll sign the exclusive right to sell, right? I'm the seller. You're the agent. And I say, I promise to pay you a commission no matter who sells the property. Now, I know a lot of people that buy real estate and sell real estate, etc. So I just end up going to let's say a cocktail party. At that, remember, I'm the seller of this property. I go to the cocktail party. At the cocktail party, a buddy of mine was like, yo, man, what's up? I'm like, hey, what's up? Hey, I'm selling my unit and blah, blah, blah. And my buddy's like, oh, dude, why don't you tell me? I would love to buy it. I've been looking at that unit for years. I love that unit. Why don't you tell me? I'm like, all right, well, let's just work out a deal. So we work out a deal at this party, and I decide that they're going to buy it, and they're ready to buy it. And I was like, oh, that's great. I can save my money on this commission and everything else. I call up the real estate agent, I'm like, hey, good news. I had a great time at a party this weekend, and even better news, I got somebody to buy my unit on my own. So call off the search. It's done. And you're like, hey, that's awesome, man. I get paid no matter what. So the exclusive right to sell means that you get paid no matter who sells the property or who finds the buyer, including the seller. So that's the distinction between the exclusive agency, which is this one, and the exclusive right to sell. So you want to know the difference. Exclusive agency means that the agent has the exclusive right to market the property just like above, but the seller retains the right to sell it themselves without paying a commission. So the exclusive agency contract is one that the real estate professional would rather not have. Obviously, all real estate agents would rather have the exclusive right to sell. As a matter of fact, when they show up to a listing, they don't bring two contracts. They bring that exclusive right to sell only. And then they, the agents that are trying to be ethical about it, in a sense, I don't mean that they're unethical about it, but they pretend like it's not even an option. They just bring the exclusive right to sell to the listing consultation, and that's all they'll bring. And so in a way that you might, again, think about this, you might want to vet, hey, listen, seller, do you know of anybody that might want to buy the property? Family members, friends, relations, have you told anybody you're thinking about selling? Are you trying to market this property without us? That yes or no. And then so the ethical agents are really trying to vet this question before. But most people aren't going to show up with two contracts. They show up with the first one here, the exclusive right to sell. Now, if more than one agency gets a listing, it's an open listing. Multiple agents can market the property, and only the agent who finds the buyer earns the commission. So in an open listing agreement, you'll see this with rental properties in rental markets. Many times big portfolio landlords might just say, hey, I'm going to give this listing sheet to everybody. So here I'm going to put it in one spot, but everybody has access to it. Every firm, if they can find a ready, willing, and able tenant to rent my unit, now has access to it. Here you go. And then the first one that the landlord accepts, the entire package, they get paid the commission. And that's sort of how an open listing works. It's tantamount to first come, first served. The final one, I am willing to put money that this is on every real estate exam in the United States. A net listing. It's very popular. And in most states, it's illegal. In some states, it's legal. In a net listing, the seller sets a minimum price that they want to receive, and the agent keeps any amount above that as their commission. Now, in most states, it is illegal. So basically, the net listing, in so many words, says, hey, listen, I want $2 million for my place. If you can sell it for anything above $2 million, you can keep it, agent. And so like the agent sells it for $2.5 million, and then they can theoretically keep the $500,000 on top. Now, the reason why they're illegal, and we price based off of a function of what the market will dictate, a percentage of that, is because it could significantly affect valuations in an area by artificially inflating the price of a property far beyond what the actual market value is. So it's this way that you can significantly, have a negative effect on market valuation, and that's one of the reasons why they are prohibited. let's hit this question. Let me bring this down a little bit. All right, here we go. Robert, a real estate agent, signs a listing agreement with Mary, a seller. If Robert finds a buyer, Mary will pay him a commission. But if Mary finds the buyer herself, she does not owe Robert a commission. What type of listing agreement is this? Letter A, an exclusive right to sell. Letter B, open listing. Letter C, exclusive agency. Letter D, net listing. And the answer is... Oh, jumped over that. Hold on. Sorry. My gizmo is acting weird lately. Boom. Letter C, exclusive agency. All right. So this is like the style of question that you might see if you were to get something like this. Again, being aware of the different types, definitely knowing the distinction between an exclusive right to sell and an exclusive agency. And this is an exclusive agency. It's basically saying, Mary is the owner and she's reserving the right to pay Robert. However, if it doesn't work out, then she doesn't have to pay him. And so, you can't mark up the question like I'm marking up. But what I tend to do when I'm taking test questions or I'm studying for something is I tend to mark, if I can, what's happening. And if I don't mark it actually, I might mark it in my mind. Now, the truth is, a great tip for a test taker is, yes, you can't do it on an exam. You can mark the question digitally and then come back to it. But what I do when I'm studying is, if I'm studying with a printout of something or a paper or the book or something like that, I'll mark the book. Now, just the act of visually doing that a few times to a couple of questions automatically sets your mind to trigger the ability to be able to see it visually in your mind. So as you're learning, practice that just a few times. It gets your mind oriented to understanding that you're looking for certain things. And these things matter, as you can tell in the questions, because they're the things that typically come up often. All right, next question is, what is the purpose of buyer brokerage or tenant representation contracts? So, buyer brokerage or tenant representation contracts establish a formal agency relationship outlining the client's duties, outlining the agent's duties, compensation, and exclusivity, while ensuring that the buyer or tenant receives professional representation. By outlining the expectations of both parties, the contract helps prevent disputes regarding service, loyalty, or compensation. All right, so buyer brokerage and tenant representation agreements are definitely parts of what happens in our business. And, in the 90s, so before I think it was like 93, they're never going to tell you this date, but around like 1993-ish, we decided, many states started to approve a type of agency called buyer's agency. It didn't exist prior to that. As a matter of fact, all real estate brokerages clients were considered sellers, and buyers weren't represented. Landlords were represented, but tenants weren't purposefully represented for the majority of transactions. Then we hit the 90s, and then we started to look at, if we have seller's agency, then we should have buyer's agency. That just makes, ideal sense. And so we adopted it. And then, so what's happened then is this evolution of buyer's agency representation, buyer's firms, exclusive tenant rep. If you go into the commercial leasing markets, it's the same license, by the way. Everybody gets the same exact license. So regardless of your discipline, the commercial markets seemingly are way more sophisticated feeling. But if you break, in essence, what they do compared to a residential brokerage practitioner, it's the same fundamental job. And it's the same actual license from state to state to state, just so you understand. Now, the evolution of tenant representation, exclusive tenant rep firms in the commercial space as well. And that's where all of this came from. So these representation contracts are this thing. It's never this new thing. It's just this thing that we see. Expect to just understand that they exist just like they do in the world of being a seller or landlord. The next one is something of, importance that you see across the United States, we have this designation called a transaction broker. They, in some states, call them facilitators. All right. And how do they differ from an agent? So basically, what is a transactional broker? If you're looking at your real estate books, you will see this phrase being spattered off around the brokerage section, the agency section. You'll see it. In some states, they call them facilitator. In some states, they just call them transaction brokers. So basically what's happening is in a facilitator transaction, if you're just to give you like a visual, if you're the agent, and by the agent, we're talking about agency. So let me just make sure you understand that there's this hierarchy. There's broker, and then underneath the broker, there's salespersons. The whole grouping here is called the agent or the agency or whatever. The concept of agent is the party that represents parties in the middle or the transaction. Now, in traditional agency, like seller's agency, for example, the agent is representing the seller, and the seller is the client. And then on the other side here, the agent is not representing the buyer, and that therefore the buyer is the customer. So we owe a duty of the customer relationship with this buyer, and we owe the client the fiduciary obligation. And we talked about that. We defined that earlier today. So the fiduciary obligation, or cold AC, is owed to the seller. Well, and as a facilitator, what we do is we get rid of clients. And in essence, what we do is we represent the transaction. And the seller is now a customer. And so is the buyer. So what do we owe both sides? We owe them simply disclosure and accounting. Disclosure and accounting. Remember, we learned earlier that there's this acronym, cold AC. Well, in cold AC, care, obedience, loyalty, we don't owe them that. Disclosure and accounting, and then confidentiality, we don't owe them. We owe disclosure and accounting. So as a transaction broker, we are representing the transaction, not representing the sides. And, it's interesting, but a lot of folks don't tend to practice this, even though a lot of times the way the relationship is structured is actually like this. You'll see seller's agency, you'll see buyer's agency, you'll see landlord rep, you'll see tenant rep, and then you'll see dual agency representation and designated agency representation. However, transaction brokers, you don't see as much in the field necessarily. You'll see it, you will see it, I see it, but you'll see it on the exam in terms of being a transaction broker. And that's why they call them transaction brokers. I'm just going to read the slide that we had. What is a transaction broker? A transaction broker or facilitator provides assistance to both parties in a transaction without, this is the operative phrase, without representing either party in a fiduciary capacity. They are less common in residential real estate, but may be used in commercial financing or for certain investment strategies. So, think about it in the commercial space. You have a huge company, for example, Google, and then you have this huge portfolio landlord that's a real estate investment trust, and they have their own teams of people negotiating all of their stuff. They might just need somebody to kind of be in the middle, an intermediary, holding on to the money, making sure the transaction's moving forward, making sure everything's great, and helping with general practices of the common trends in the industry, et cetera. And that's what they could be hiring these brokers for, as opposed to negotiating back and forth. And that's what a transaction broker is. Set this question. Here we go. Which party in a real estate transaction does a facilitator represent? Letter A, the buyer. Letter B, the seller. Letter C, both the buyer and the seller. Letter D, neither the buyer nor the seller. And the answer is D, neither the buyer nor the seller. And this is how they would bring this facilitator style or transaction broker question. Another way that they could bring it is what fiduciary obligations, if any, are owed to both sides. And then the answer to that would be disclosure and accounting. So this is where they might bring questions of that. when it comes down to it. Just, be mindful of this. But, you're definitely going to see something about facilitator on the exam. All right, the next question. What is the purpose of a power of attorney in real estate transactions? Power of attorney. I'll give you the answer here. A power of attorney grants authority to another person to act on behalf of the principal, such as signing documents during a transaction. Now, just a couple of 2 weeks ago, I closed the transaction. I was the power of attorney for a buddy of mine who lives internationally, but still has a primary residence in the U.S. So knowing a thing or two about all these transactions and having done a bazillion of them, I'm, the go-to fella when I have my international buddies that just kind of like, hey, I can't be there to do the signing. Can you just sign everything for me? Sure. So basically, it's granting authority in what they call in the business is a durable, specific power of attorney. And that durable power of attorney is for closing these types of transactions. And you're basically just signing on their behalf. You're signing their name as attorney, in fact, for them. So basically, it's giving you the authority to close. POAs are definitely used in the transactions. And you want to know for exam purposes what a POA stands for and kind of what it does. You're letting you act on behalf of the principal. Another classic question that I've seen is, why is an open listing considered a unilateral contract? Why is an open listing considered a unilateral contract? And we just kind of went through an open listing, and this is an important one because they want you to know what bilateral contracts are and unilateral contracts. And bilateral contracts, by the way, are on, and so are unilaterals on the exam. Remember, an option contract is an example of unilateral contract. An open listing is a unilateral contract. Uni is Latin for one, and so therefore you have one party that has to perform on the contract, and an option, that's an example of that, a unilateral contract. So an open listing is a unilateral contract because only the seller is obligated to pay a commission if the agent produces a ready, willing, and able buyer. The agent has no obligation to perform unless they choose to. And so this is something very common that you see on exams. So you want to know, it could be all of the following are bilateral contracts, except now the lion's share of everything that you're going to be learning about is bilateral, like an exclusive right to sell, the purchase and sales agreement, a lease. All of these are bilateral contracts. It's more than both parties have to do something, right? In a unilateral contract, only one party has the obligation to perform. And so in an open listing, it's unilateral because the landlord is saying, hey, listen, I'm obligated to pay a commission if they agree to pay a commission, so long as you produce me a ready, willing, and able tenant and we close the transaction. And so that's a unilateral contract versus a bilateral contract. So you definitely want to know something like this for your exam. The next question is, what are some common conditions for terminating an agency relationship? What are some common conditions for the termination of agency? Without doubt, the termination of agency is going to be on this exam. So the termination of agency relationships. Now, some of the classic ones are the completion of the transaction. The most ideal way that we can terminate agency is the completion or fulfillment of the transaction. Mutual agreement. Both parties can agree to terminate the listing. The expiration of the listing agreement, the death or incapacity of the principal or agent, or a breach of contract. Now, I'm telling you, something like all of the following are reasons for terminating an agency relationship, except is going to be on this examination. So you want to understand this slide, and just note in your books also, you'll see them, termination. It's covered in every book in the country, whichever books you're using, including if somebody wrote their own book that's teaching, their proprietary book, or the mass market ones that you see with the larger publications, publishing houses. They're all going to cover this. We covered in our study guide. It's one of those things that's absolutely covered because we know it's going to be high probability that it just makes common sense if you're dealing with contracts. Now, the other thing that you want to study outside of agency relationships and termination is contracts and their terminations. Some of the classic reasons for terminating a contract. Let's hit this question. Make sure you guys can see that. I'll just do like this. Okay. David is selling his home and has an open listing agreement with multiple agents. One of the agents, Lisa, has been actively showing the property to potential buyers. After a month, David finds a buyer himself without the help of any of the agents. Which of the following is true regarding the status of Lisa's open listing agreement and her compensation? Letter A. The open listing is automatically terminated because Lisa failed to find a buyer right away. Letter B. Lisa is still entitled to a commission because she had been actively marketing the property. Letter C. The agreement is terminated because David procured a buyer himself, and under an open listing, only the agent who finds the buyer earns a commission. Letter D, the listing agreement is not terminated because David must use an agent to sell his house. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'll give you a second to read and read through the answers. Now, sometimes you do see these long-winded interrogatories on these questions, so learn to pace yourself and learn to read these things and understand how long they typically take so you don't freak out when you get to the exam. And the answer? Boom. Letter C. The agreement is terminated because David procured the buyer himself, and under an open listing, only the agent who finds the buyer earns a commission. So David is selling his home. So David is the seller and has an open listing agreement with multiple agents. Hey, everybody, I'm selling my home, but I'm also letting you get an opportunity to help me find a buyer. One of these agents, Lisa, has been actively showing the property to potential buyers. After a month, David finds a buyer himself without the help of any of the agents. Which of the following is true regarding the status of Lisa's open listing agreement? Lisa gets paid nothing. Lisa might have wanted to push for an exclusive, maybe an exclusive agency, but even if David finds the buyer himself as a seller, he doesn't have to pay her commission. So if Lisa really wanted to earn a commission on this, she either had to close the deal, beat David before he found somebody, or get an exclusive right to sell. But if she exceeded the termination of the expiration period, then we could terminate the contract. Awesome. The final one here is, what is the difference between a client and a customer in real estate? What duties does an agent owe to a customer? And this is a good question in terms of, well, what do we owe each side? This is sort of a fundamental thing in agency, but a client is someone who has entered into a formal agency agreement with an agent, and the agent owes them that fiduciary duty, the old car. A customer is someone who interacts with the agent but has not signed an agency agreement with them. The agent does not owe a customer fiduciary duties, which are reserved for clients, but must treat them with honesty, integrity, and fair dealings. So the duties we owe to a customer are honesty, integrity, and fair dealings. We owe a client, also known as a principal, care, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, and confidentiality. Okay, so this is reasonable care, by the way. So old car is obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care. And, cold AC is care, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, and confidentiality. So it's like, a half a dozen to one, six to another, like that kind of thing. So the idea here is that the client is owed the fiduciary obligation, and the customer is owed honesty, integrity, and fair dealings. Now, if they are made misrepresentations, then the customer can certainly sue, even if the duties were violated. If the client's duties are violated, then they can sue under lack of fiduciary trust. But a customer can sue also if they're made purposeful misrepresentations or negligent misrepresentations, etc., under many states' consumer protection laws. So check your states to see if there's any laws on the books regarding consumer protection laws, purposeful, wanton, or negligent misrepresentations, and what they may include there. There's also lists that you can grab to find out what types of defects have to be disclosed and what doesn't have to be disclosed. Things like the psychologically impacted property questions, stigmatized properties, the barking dog scenario, the noisy neighbor scenario, what needs to be disclosed, what doesn't need to be disclosed, et cetera, et cetera. You'll see these on real estate exams without fail. All right. That brings us to a conclusion of yet another exam breakdown. Today we talked about agency. We went through a couple questions. We get hopefully recentered you a little bit here with thinking about some of these common questions that do come up. And some of these questions are things that you definitely see on the exams. They're just the little fine points, a little here, a little there, sprinkle, sprinkle. And that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see. All right. So thank you very much for spending some time with me today. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you all so much if you have. Very, 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 honored to have the channel growing like crazy and everybody is, passing their exams. I love the comments. I'm watching the comments. We listen. If there's anything we can teach you to help you learn more, please don't hesitate to drop it in the comments. A student just reached out a couple of days ago about a particular topic, and I'm covering that topic this Wednesday at the exam breakdown for mortgage originators. So again, we're watching, we're listening, we're paying attention, we're trying to make sure that you are, our people that respond, we respond pretty quickly, and we're sort of answering every question that we can possibly get to, and we're sort of giving breakdowns in detail and everything else. So again, we're here to help you. It is my goal to cut through the nonsense so that you can learn what you need to learn to pass this examination. So anything that's coming out of my mouth, for the most part, with any of this stuff is really the stuff that we have identified as really high value, and I'm trying to just filter out the stuff that you don't need. That's the goal, okay? Thank you once again for hanging with us. I hope this yields you some success. Good luck with your studies, and good luck on your tests. I'll see you at the next exam breakdown, which is this Wednesday. And don't forget, today, February 3rd, we're dropping the part 4 of our 100 question series for 2025. You real estate agents that are about to get licensed and pass this exam are going to be passing it with those 4 videos. So look out for them today. There's a drop-in one at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and parts 1, 2, and 3 are already out there. Bonus props to someone that can spot the video with my daughter and I. She's reading a question. It's completely cute. She's awesome. And it's the biggest reasons why I love to teach. I love to involve, help them learn and everything else. It's so exciting. Anyway, good luck, and I'll see you guys at the next one.